Thank you for joining us for the annual meeting of the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council. If you could make your way to your seats, we are going to begin by welcoming our elected leaders and friends. We have guests from as far away as Mount Vernon and the Eastern Shore of Virginia and all over the peninsula. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I am Jim Rapp. I am the president this year of the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council, and it is quite an honor to serve in that capacity and to welcome you today to our third annual meeting. But before we get started, we have some elected and appointed leaders here. I want to mention, and just wave if you will or stand, from Wicomico County, I saw Brad Bellachico, our Chamber of Commerce Director. Where's Brad? Hey, Brad. And I haven't, I haven't yet seen my friend Spicer Bell. Erica's here for the Community Foundation, so welcome, Erica, and we'll see Spicer here hopefully shortly. From Worcester County, we have from the Ocean City Council, Louise Goulias is here. Hi, Louise. County Commission, my apologies. County Commission, thank you, Louise. And a member, good catch, and a member of the Heritage Council. Also, I've seen Pocomoke County Manager Russ Blake is here today. Hello, Mr. Blake. Pocomoke City Councilman Bob Hawkins is here. Hey, Bob. And also, I saw Nancy Howard and Mike Pennington on the list, but I don't think I've seen them come in just yet. Oh, Mike is here. Very good. And from Somerset County, Jay Parker, Town Manager of Princess Anne. Hello, Jay. And Danny Thompson, Somerset County Economic Development is here as well. Hey, Danny. And both these fine gentlemen serve in the council. And then from a little farther away, we have our friend Marcy Ross from Maryland Tourism. Where's Marcy? I saw her come in. Thanks for making the trip, Marcy. And finally, I think Lee Whaley from Senator Cardin's office is joining us as well. Have not seen her walk in. So anyway, without further delay, I want to welcome, first want to mention, you're going to be notified for the buffet by Jackie, who is with food service here. And before we begin, if you'll join, welcome Duke Marshall from the Heritage Council with our invocation for today's luncheon. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd all bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly, most gracious God, we come to you and ask thanks for not only this day, this beautiful day, but for the people that are gathered. We also thank you for our wonderful heritage. We pray for blessings for each and every one that's gathered here. We ask especially a blessing on our military that serve our country every day. And we ask for blessings on the food which we're about to partake on, that it will nourish our body and strengthen us each day. Please be with us and guide us, and in your name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Duke. Again, I want to welcome you all to the third annual meeting of the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council. Again, I am Jim Rapp, president of the council. With me to my left is Sharon Shore, our executive director. So we are going to be sharing with you in just a moment a few of our new initiatives. These fine gentlemen have joined me, and then we'll get into other parts of our program. So please welcome Sharon Shore.
Thank you all so much. I just want to thank all of you to be here today in attendance. This is our best attended annual meeting ever. We have more new initiatives than ever. We have more exhibitors than ever. We're excited to be hearing in a few moments from our guest speaker, Mr. Rees from Mount Vernon. I had the chance to see him, even though he may not know it, on CBS's Sunday Morning several months ago with a wonderful interview, and I just thought we have to get him out here so that he can share what's going on with their initiatives. I want to thank the board members this year. You all have been fantastic. The executive committee has been superb in leadership and support and in driving this organization forward. But I want to take a special quick moment to thank three professionals. I'll add one more to it as well. I call them my go-tos in each county. Whenever I have a question, whenever I need a review of anything, whenever we need to join together as a region on the Lower Shore, they're my go-to gals, and I want them all to stand. Lisa Challenger, Worcester County. Julie Widdison, I know you're here, Julie, from Somerset. Sandy Fulton, over there in that beautiful lime green, Wicomico County. And Marcy Ross, a special guest from the state, stand up, girl. One of my personal goals, and one I think the board has really accepted and wanted us to continue with, is all 3 counties working for heritage tourism. For every dollar in the state of Maryland that they spend supporting heritage tourism in grants and funding, we see a $5 return on investment in our communities, and that deserves a round of applause. And this year, the 3 DMOs, as I just described them, will be working with the Lower Eastern Shore on a grant we've received for $30,000 from Maryland Heritage Areas Authority. And that grant will be to market for the first time all 3 counties together for heritage tourism. So I'm excited about that. And again, thank you so much and welcome.
All right. Yeah, we definitely owe a huge debt of thanks to Lisa, Julie, Sandy, and Marcy as well. Okay, the next thing, I think right about now, you're probably eating dessert. Is it Boston cream pie? Nope. Okay, what we did yesterday, was it key lime pie from Florida? Anyway, a couple months ago, actually longer than that, there's been an idea kind of brewing around the heritage community down here to promote a local treat, a local dessert to become Maryland state dessert. Actually, Marcy Ross, if I remember right, a year ago said, have you guys done that? That's really a good idea. So we do listen, Marcy. So anyway, I want to introduce again, thank you, Marcy, for that, yes, inspiration. So yesterday, and if you all get the Daily Times, most of you do, a crew of us here spent a day in Annapolis delivering pieces of Maryland's soon-to-be state dessert to our delegates in Annapolis. And Duke Marshall's going to join me to tell you all about yesterday and kind of where this project is going. So, Duke, will you join me?
Do you want this helmet?
I'll be the...
Considering Jim Rapp has just told you everything we did yesterday, one of the more exciting things that we've done is to take the cake to our legislators, and myself, Jim Rapp, Julie Widdowson, Jerry Bell, and Jay Parker all stormed the legislative halls yesterday, and some of the cakes that you're eating today, actually all the cakes, we took the traditional chocolate, the yellow cake with chocolate icing, and which was donated by Dana Evans of Classic Cakes here in Salisbury. And she is taking orders. She's been in the back room, so I can assure you she can get those to you. But we were very well received. When we left yesterday, we had 84 co-sponsors on the bill, and basically we met with no resistance. But one of the things that was exciting about this in talking with our legislators is that this was a fun thing, but it's also an economic thing for our communities, and more specifically Smith Island, and with the hardships with the crab and the oyster population, and it was met with open arms by all our legislators. And with that, Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council took this on as an initiative to help move it in that direction. And for that, we're very appreciative as well. Jim, go ahead. You all probably cannot read this, but Jay and Jim and a couple, well, everybody except me wore these aprons yesterday. And they say, Maryland's luscious layers, Smith Island cake. And when we go on up in the next few weeks to continue this path, hopefully to make it the state dessert, we're having buttons made that says, got cake. And the colors you might find interesting is cake batter yellow and chocolate icing brown for the lettering. So hopefully it'll be well received as well. And we wish this group luck with that initiative. And for those of you out here that mailed in letters and support and all like that, we thank you as well. It's been overwhelming with that. Jim?
Thank you very much, Duke. All right, I told a few folks my goal in this whole effort was to see a picture of Jay Parker in the Daily Times wearing an apron. I got that today, so check your paper out. But as Duke said, not to go long into it, I know this crowd knows it, but it really is about economic development. I want to thank Delegate Paige Elmore, who understands that. I mean, we already, Duke and I have been talking, and Dana a little bit about what this can do for our bakeries in the region, also the community on Smith Island. And this really is hopefully going to turn into jobs and economic development through the sale of cakes, but also through tourism. As somebody said in the Daily Times, the best place to enjoy a piece of Smith Island cake is on Smith Island. So with that, we'll continue on. I want to thank again the cake team, as we call them, and last night, WBAL TV Evening News, they were all eating one of Dana's cakes on the broadcast. So thanks to Dana and Classic Cakes here in Salisbury. All right, I'm going to speak next to another initiative, and these are literally hot off the presses from Warwick Community College and the War Museum. The Heritage Council, along with the group that I now work for called Delmarva Low Impact Tourism Experiences, we are teaming up on a course. One of the things that Ruth Baker at Warwick had a meeting with our DMOs, Lisa, Julie, and Sandy, and a few folks, earlier this year to talk about what does the tourism industry need to help promote ourselves better through heritage and nature tourism, what kind of training. So, long story short, we have come up with the title, Interpreting Nature and Heritage Sites for Visitors. Now, this course is not being taught by one person. I'd like the instructors who've been involved so far to please stand. Carrie Samus is here. Let's see here, we got Bill Wilson, Laura Bottinelli, Kathy Fisher, Sylvia Bradley, Sudie Gatling, Lisa Challenger, and many others from Astig National Seashore and beyond. A round of applause, please, for the instructors. Our approach with this is going to be to help educate our volunteers and staff working in the museums, the parks, and the zoos on how important they are to what we do, not just in sharing those stories and telling stories, but also what that means to economic development and tourism. So, what I'm hoping today is on the table as you go out, there will be a whole stack of these brochures. If you are representing a museum, a heritage site, or a park, please pick these up. Here's the great news. With our Friends of the Community Foundation, if you are currently involved with a nonprofit, your tuition will be reimbursed by the Community Foundation. And help me out, if you're over 62, it's free anyway. So 60, thank you. So for anyone in the room over 60 or currently involved as a staff or volunteer at one of our parks and museums, you can take this great course for nothing. The dates, last thing, are coming up soon. March 3rd at the War Museum. March 5th at the UMES Coastal Ecology Teaching and Research Center right near Assateague National Seashore. West Side Historical Society and Pemberton Historical Park. 4 sessions, 1 class to help elevate the cause in interpreting our museums and heritage here for visitors. So that's a very exciting project. The next folks I'd like to introduce are Glenn Irwin, who is a Heritage Council board member and the director of the Ocean City Development Corps, and Jonathan Hutcherson with Forest Products to talk about the Blue Crab Scenic Byways and the Interpretive Kiosk Project. Thanks, Glenn and Jonathan.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon. It's been about 5 years ago we started this adventure, creating a new scenic byway which actually traverses all 3 counties. Prior to that time, we had 3 or 4 disjointed scenic byways. Worked with the State Highway Administration, and there is a booth back there if you get a chance to look at it. We've created this kind of mega 210-mile scenic byway route that goes through the 3 lower counties. Part of that was purely to tie the 3 counties in for many interests, to highlight the historic interest, the cultural interest, recreation interest, but also to help market this as one bigger piece. We have declared, we have stated that the Scenic Byway is an approved state Scenic Byway program. Jim's bringing it up just to show you. What State Highway's been doing for the last year is placing these signs throughout this 210-mile route, and there's probably several hundred of them, and it's been going on for the last year. So if you're driving down the road, whether it's Old Ocean City, whether it's Route 13, 113 coming through Worcester County, and there's a number of spurs that come off of this as well. Not only does the byway currently take you through a lot of the downtown areas in these 3 counties, but it also take it as a spur to Crisfield or Deal Island or Sharptown or Ocean City. And so next time you're on it, there's a lot of positive implications. Part of the process was to do a corridor management plan, which we're currently implementing, seeking state funds for stuff such as these signs and a number of other signs. I would like to mention Valerie Mann is our Lower Eastern Shore Scenic Byway Coordinator. Valerie, please stand up. And she's also does a lot of grant writing for Lower Eastern Shore Council. And so next time you're driving down the road, you see this. There's a lot of positive implications. The next major step we are just currently entering right now is to declare this 210-mile corridor a national, get national designation, which has many positive impacts. And that's something you'll probably be hearing about more in the future. At this time, though, connected to the scenic byway and the whole lower three counties, let me turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Glenn. First of all, let me knock this over. We have a very exciting project starting, and thanks to MHAA, the SHA, and of course Sharon kind of pulled everything together on your side. We're going to be putting 6 kiosks, just like the one you see over here, basically 2 in each county of everywhere along the Blue Crab route. These are basically all part of the Forest Destination Marketing System, which is kind of the database or the software application that runs everything behind the scenes. And what Forest does is it basically allows the tourism and the heritage businesses that are part of it, and it's literally hundreds, if not into the thousands between all 3 counties, to share their data across, whether it's a website, which we will also be doing, the 6 kiosks, any number of devices. There'll probably be devices out 2 or 3 years from now that we can't even imagine what they are here today. But more importantly, it doesn't just share the data across electronic devices, but it also shares it across city lines, across county lines, and state lines. Great example of that is the fact that we currently have 4 kiosks out in Dorchester County, 2 indoor ones, 2 outdoor ones, and we have 10 now up in Western Maryland, where we're from. It's a mix of indoor and outdoor. We actually just put a nice outdoor unit at Sidling Hill last Thursday morning, and of course as soon as we got it installed, it had about 4 inches of ice on it within 2 hours. So it's getting its test this week. But basically, we're very excited about this, and I think it's going to let people see what events are going on. It's going to let them see lodging availability. It's going to let them get driving directions from each kiosk to the particular attraction or heritage area that they're looking for. It's really a new level of customer self-service, which will not only help the customers who are in your market looking to do things, but more importantly probably help the actual stakeholders and the businesses and those attractions within your own counties. So it's very exciting, and thank you all. Please come see our kiosk before you leave. Get an example.
All right, then we got a little volume up there. So as you can see, there's several exciting new initiatives. Now, another one, a final one for right now, that I know many of us in this room have been meeting and working with our friends at PAC 14. I know Mike Goodson and Craig Twilley and Tom are here today. An idea came out to kind of, again, I won't do what I did to Duke. I'll let Dr. Mike Scott tell you this story. I'm very excited about this. Mike, will you join me?
Sure. Say Jim could do it. That's all right. Yeah, just wanted to take this opportunity to announce the launch of a very exciting initiative that is getting underway. It's a partnership between PAC 14, our local public access cable channel here in Wicomico County, Salisbury University, the NAB Center for Delmarva History and Culture, and a number of, about a dozen or so, of local heritage organizations to attempt to capture heritage and events and people and places in the region that unfortunately it seems that we are so quickly losing to the march of progress and development and change. The name of this initiative is the Digitizing Delmarva Heritage and Traditions Project. And what you will soon be seeing as it begins to roll is some sample footage that has been shot over the years, which is by Craig and Mike, that is representative of the type of thing we look to accomplish. We're going to do this in a number of different ways. First of all, I really think it's important to mention that PAC 14 has actually stepped up and funded the hiring of a part-time videographer, Tom Taylor, who's in the back working the cameras there. He will be, for this first 6 months, going through and capturing particular events and people and whatnot. And then starting in the fall, the goal is to have a graduate student in the history department at Salisbury University take over part of that role and go forth and, as their work for the 2 years that they're getting their degree, to be going out and capturing events and heritage and traditions that again, we're very worried about losing. So now, what can you do? Because obviously the one student, or even the one Tom, not going to be able to get to everything that he needs to. The number of possibilities to capture are tremendous, so there's a number of different ways. First is to think about any videos that you might have to submit to the project. A lot of people have captured things over the years that might be appropriate, so you can think about that. Second is the ability to capture your own video in addition to when you're going out to an event, and you can capture your own. Third is obviously making suggestions on what the initiative could start to capture. And I'll point out, and I'll mention it again, but PAC-14's website, www.pac14.org, is going to be our initial contact to the DDHT, is the initials, the DDHT initiative, in order for you to contact and give submissions on possibilities. And so that is certainly a possibility. And then lastly, an initiative that's associated with it that we're going to get rolling throughout the spring is, and is really Jim Rapp's idea, so I'll point at Jim, is if you've ever heard NPR's StoryCorps, where they go out and capture oral histories where people are often talking to their loved ones, so a son interviewing a grandfather, for example. We're going to be trying to set up opportunities at probably the libraries around the Lower Shore, Wacomico, Worcester, and Somerset, to have people come in and interview their friends or their relatives or whatever, so that they can actually get their own stories told. And eventually all of this footage will either be made ready for broadcast on PAC-14, for streaming over the internet from PAC-14's website, or a fair amount of it will end up in the archives of the NAB Center. If it's not, it's a little rough, or it just isn't what we think perhaps we'd want to put out in PAC-14. All of it will be kept, though, so that people can use it in the future at the NAB Center. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. I just want to add to Mike's comments that the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council has taken a lead role in looking for funding to continue this program through the state, and we've also put in an application with the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, so we're doing that as well. Salisbury University Foundation will take donations if you're interested. You just need to mark them PAC-14 DDHT Initiative.
Excellent. And I just want to add up some of the footage you saw there. I think we decided to serve Smith Island cake, not homemade scrapple, but you got to see some being made there, I think, in one of the videos. But it's fascinating, and we have a lot to celebrate here, and that's part of what the Heritage Council does, is try to share these stories of our sort of celebrity historians, our heritage sites. The footage keep rolling here. We got some other interesting stuff to see. But I really do want to thank Mike and Craig and Tom and Ray Thompson and Mike Scott for their leadership on this. This is the type of stuff you see on History Channel, and we have it right here, and the kind of things you see on the Travel Channel that people want to see and meet real, authentic, have real local experiences. Okay, our next part of the program is all of this comes through an organization that you're here today to join. That is the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council. So who are these folks? If you're a member of the council, please stand and be recognized. All right, Michael Day, Duke Marshall, Bill Wilson, Julie Woodison, Danny Thompson, Sylvia Bradley, Laura Bottinelli, Randy Iff. We got Bob Hawkins, Lisa Challenger, Louise Gullius, Glenn Irwin. You can see all these great folks. Jay Parker, Jack Lennox, Jerry Bell, John Terrell, Carol Kane, and Kate Patton. And that's not all of us, folks. A round of applause, please. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, and one of our new members, Brian Garrett, who today is represented by friends from the Delmarva Discovery Center in Pocomoke. I saw Barbara. There's Barbara. Hi, Barbara. So anyway, this is the group, and these folks represent, again, museums, government agencies, planning and zoning, all the folks working together to make projects like the ones you see around the room happen. But of course, we also have to take a moment. All doesn't happen with volunteers. Our wonderful staff led by our Executive Director, Sharon Shore. Thank you. Lisa Ludwig, who you've seen floating around today, helping out organize all of this. Thank you, Lisa. And of course, Valerie Mann, our Blue Crab Scenic Byway Coordinator, and many other folks who, again, we work with together to make these things happen. Okay, now the next step. the 2007 Annual Heritage Awards, one of my favorite parts. Jay Parker, Princess Anne Town Manager and Heritage Council Vice President, if he would join me. He won't wear an apron today. We'll keep that in the box. But Jay is going to share with you the Heritage Award winners for this, the third annual awards banquet. Jay, thanks.
Actually, I was rather surprised to see that picture in the paper this morning. I thought that Jim looked much more fetching in his apron than I did. But it was an exceptional experience for us yesterday to spend an entire day in the House of Delegates in the office building. I think we shook hands with nearly 100 delegates. When we started out, our delegate, Paige Elmore, who was introducing the bill, had 40 co-sponsors with signatures, and during the course of the day, we were able to bring that number up to 83 co-sponsors. Paige's goal, of course, was 100 co-sponsors out of the 147 delegates. It was a really exciting and rewarding experience. Of course, when you're cold calling, and in my previous life I did a bunch of cold calling, nothing beats being able to walk in the door with a slice of luscious cake in your hand like this, and you get an immediate positive reception. What we're about, what our group is about, and the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council is, in fact, as you are clearly aware when you heard all those introductions of council members, we are an umbrella organization. And each one of the people who stood up when Jim so rapidly popped those names out represents an entire organization, a board of directors, a bunch of workers, some kind of institution, some kind of building, or some aspect of the heritage of the Lower Shore that we are about engaged in preserving, encouraging, and educating. If we don't know where we came from, we're going to have a lot more trouble figuring out who we are and possibly where we might be going. So it's a great honor for me and for our organization to be able to recognize and to honor some of the outstanding people, and this room is full of outstanding people, but a few of the outstanding people whose efforts have been special, not just in one way, but in many ways. At this point, I'd like to ask Sudi and James Gatling if they would come forward, please. You can pick either set of steps to come up on the stage. While they're coming forward, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the incredible effort that this wonderful couple has been involved with, well, one of the efforts that they've been involved with. When they have been working with the Sturgis One-Room School. Now think about what this involves. You start with a building, all right, probably dilapidated. So the first part of the aspects of the work that needs to be done is to ascertain the value of the building and then get to work on restoring and preserving the building. So that's the physical aspect of it. Now, if you're going to turn this into a museum, you have curatorial aspects. It's not just, here it is, folks, go and look at it. It is becoming a museum. It's becoming a formal part of our heritage. In addition to that, you have not only the physical and curatorial aspects, you have the financial aspects. This isn't going to work with a lot of hours and a lot of money. I haven't seen one yet that didn't require a lot of money. Always more money than we expected. So this couple, who are very, very special, have been involved right from the beginning with the Sturgis One-Room School in terms of doing the research, inventorying, cataloging, planning programs, in being involved hands-on in the actual restoration. They've created the whole marketing operation. They've been involved in all the business aspects of it. This is kind of like a one-man band here, I think. They are so special that they were recognized by the Maryland Commission's 2000 as a Maryland Historical Treasure. They've been recognized by the Pocomoke Mayor and City Council, and they've been inducted into the Maryland Senior Citizens Hall of Fame for volunteer services. And even today, they serve on nearly a dozen different boards to continue their, I think you should forget retirement and just go back to work. It would be easier.
There you go.
It's a great honor for the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council to recognize these wonderful couple, Sudi and James Gatling, by presenting them with the 2007 Heritage Interpreter Award. not only does it take these special kinds of people, one of the other parts of our preservation practice is celebrations. Now, we all get involved in celebrations, I hope, with birthdays and anniversaries. We have celebrations of religious activities and religious dates. We have celebrations of municipal, jurisdictional, governmental things. And those are all very, very important because they are part of helping us to remind ourselves who we are, where we came from, and aren't we having a great time? And not all celebrations, of course, are about great times, but they are very important as a part of our education and as a part of having a fulfilling life. Now, what does the celebration involve? Most of our celebrations, like birthdays and anniversaries, there's a date, there's an activity, there is something that happened that we wish to commemorate. Sometimes you have to create a celebration out of what we might call whole cloth. You have to start with an idea, and then you have to people it and finance it and get folks excited about it. And a perfect example of what I'm talking about is the blessing of the combines. So I'd like to ask Becky Payne, who I think is here today, if she would come forward. In 2008, the Blessing of the Combines will celebrate its 10th anniversary. And the truth is, whether or not you've been there, you do know that in Snow Hill, on that day, everything stops. There's only one activity. The farmers bring their combines into town to receive the annual blessing for the harvest season. And this is really a unique opportunity to honor a critical part of our agricultural heritage. So it's turned into pie-eating contests, hay rides. It's turned into all kinds of great things, all the parts of a celebration that we like. Food, fun, meeting your neighbors. I mean, that makes a great celebration. Becky is the event founder and organizer and has pulled all these parts together in just an absolutely incredible way, bringing together people who sometimes forget they have things in common. So this is a wonderful, wonderful experience to be able to present Becky with the 2007 Heritage Tourism Event Award. Now we've talked about celebrations. Let's talk about continuing to learn about where we came from, who we are, and kind of how we got here. In this regard, sometimes we need reminders. We need to go to the place. We need to have someone help us interpret and understand what we're looking at and what it might mean to our presence. I'd like to ask Kathy Fisher, if she's here, to please come forward. And here she comes. This past summer, a new cultural outreach program was started with the help, thank you, of Worcester County's government, who put some funding into it. This was set into motion to bring visitors from one of our automatic visitor magnets, Ocean City, where we get a lot of folks coming to visit the shore, to bring them and involve them in some of the history and the heritage of the shore. So during the summer months, June, July, and August, visitors this year were able to enjoy a narrated bus ride down to Snow Hill and have a personal guided tour through Furnacetown. This program has the ability in the future, we hope, to expand by picking up visitors maybe at Assateague, maybe at Berlin, other Worcester County towns, and trying to expand the operation. Kathy Fisher has been responsible for coordinating and marketing this project and making it, in fact, the beginnings of a great success. So we'd like to recognize Kathy by awarding her the 2007 Best New Heritage Initiative Award. Continuing along the theme, which is our goal today, which is to honor special people who have done special things, I want to talk to you about a person whom I've known for the whole 5 years that I've lived on the shore. And I suspect that everyone here, if you're not close to her, you will become close to her at some point. I certainly became engaged by her personality and her intellect the very first 5 minutes that I spent with her. So, Clara, could you come forward, please, Dr. Clara Small? You know, as Clara walks up here, I want you to think about this incredible combination of energy and effort and intellect and character and perseverance. She came from a multi-hour teaching session this morning, and she just came in the door before we got here. Think about, here's a person who not only has a BA, but 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. She's a history professor, as most of you know, at Salisbury, and specializes in all history teachers are capable of teaching world history and U.S. history. But Clara has specialized in American colonial history and African American history, and she's authored a book called Reality Check, Brief Biographies of African Americans on Delaware. And she's currently working on a history of African Americans on the Eastern Shore using oral history, which we have been talking quite a bit about. So it's a real honor, Clara, to present the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council's 2007 T. O'Connor Heritage Professional Award. Now, we've talked about the museums we've talked about special people who create through their artistry or their professionalism or their energy. Let's go back to people who are actually part of our living heritage. People who, when we talk about the physical aspects, we talk about the curatorial aspects, people who simply are spending their lives, as we sometimes call, taking care of business, just leading their lives in a productive way, creating and bringing to the rest of us a special asset. In this regard, we would like to honor a gentleman named Granville Trimper. And you all, of course, know the name Trimper from Trimper's Amusement Park, located at the south end of the boardwalk in Ocean City. And I'm happy to say, when I was a boy, I went on many of those rides, and now I've reached that point in life where I'm in the grandkid business, so I now have an excuse to go back with 4 or 5 grandkids and get involved with that gorgeous carousel. The carousel was built by a certain company whose name I can't pick off here, Herschel Spellman and Carousel. It is the last surviving carousel, and if you haven't seen it, you need to go have a look when they're open in the summertime. It is really stunning with these beautifully painted, hand-carved wooden animals. I can tell you my grandkids loved it as much as I certainly loved it when I was there. It's a very, very special experience, but what's really special is that the Trimper family, for all these generations, has continued to take care of business. They've continued to honor this beautiful and special historic carousel and lots of other rides for kids. There actually is no other carousel like that in the United States. They also have an antique car museum and all kinds of other interesting things for older folks to get involved in. Granville Trimper is a rather special person. He served 18 years on the Ocean City Council. He was the council president for a term. He served as the Ocean City mayor, Worcester County commissioner, and in the year 2000 received the Ocean City Chamber of Commerce Citizen of the Year Award. So he's doing what he should be doing right now. He's vacationing in Florida. He's not here. But we have 2 of his grandsons here. If you would come forward, Chris and Brooks Trimper, to receive this award in their granddad's honor. Thanks, Mom.
Fashion first.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Now, our final award today actually is going to reveal one of the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council's secret weapons. And he is, you've already seen him because he's been up here 3 or 4 times. Come on, Jerry. Jerry Gerlitsky has been involved and supported LESHC for over 10 years. He helps an incredibly key part of designing our marketing materials. He is always willing to take extra time to work after hours to produce a really high quality product. It takes a special kind of artist and professional to sit at the table when Jim and Sharon and several of us are sort of waving our arms in the air trying to describe what we want it to look like, and he actually turns it into something that is attractive, because I know what we described probably wasn't that attractive. He's produced all kinds of wonderful projects, including the African Heritage signage panels and brochures, the homegrown vegetable brochures, and our new Blue Crab Scenic Byway brochure. So it's with great pleasure we give the 2007 Heritage Award to Mr. Jerry Gerlitsky. Thank you. You trusted him with your camera? Thank you all very much. I appreciate your attention.
We just want to thank Jay. I think he does a wonderful, wonderful job in those presentations. And before Jim and Laura come to the podium, look at your programs at the table, because one lucky individual has a star stuck on their program. And you get the flowers in the center of the table, whoever has the star. And if there is a program that's not picked up and it has a star, it's whoever can get to it first, okay?
No fighting.
And also remember, we're running out of time to bid on those auction items. It is a fundraiser for us, so be sure to put your bids in.
Well said, well said. That was my announcement. We are going to collect the blue sheets from you. A couple of us will walk around the room, so take a few moments while you're listening to the next part of the program and fill out the auction forms and take a look at those great gifts. Now, before I bring up Laura Bottinelli, one of our LESHC board members and director of the Ward Museum of Wildfowl Art, I also want to mention somebody who came in a little bit after we started, but I want to acknowledge, and that's Lee Whaley, hi Lee, with Senator Cardin's office. Lee, early in the days of the Heritage Council, really got this effort going with the help of her former boss, Senator Paul Sarbanes, and we're thrilled that she's still working for us in the federal government, and we know what a huge supporter of LESHC that she is, and heritage all over the state of Maryland, so thank you, Lee. Okay, our next part of the program before our speaker is the 2007 mini grant program. Again, I'd like to introduce Laura Bottinelli from the Ward Museum.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm presenting the mini grant program, but I'm going to do a mini presentation because I am very much looking forward to our speaker, and I know so is everybody else. The Maryland Heritage Area Authority allows, through its funding of the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Council, for this organization to offer mini grants to organizations in the area who have special projects that will help to promote and preserve and enhance the heritage opportunities of the Lower Eastern Shore. And so this year, $10,000 in mini grants were awarded to the following organizations. They're in your brochure, if you wanted to read along with me. The Ocean City Development Corporation received funding for its Buildings of Significance plaque program. The Pemberton Hall Foundation received funding for the Pemberton Colonial and Heritage Fair. The Pocomoke City Main Street program received funding for its website. The Preservation Trust of Wacomico County Incorporated received funding for its Sites of History brochure reprint. SHARP, which is the Snow Hill Alliance for Responsible Progress, received funding for its Downtown Beautification Project Phase 2. The Ward Museum of Wildfowl Art received funding for its Delmarva Cooks program, and the Westside Historical Society received funding for its website. Now, I would love to come back next year and announce your organization's name as a recipient of a mini grant. The applications are on your table, and you should be filling them out before March 15th. and I really do encourage you to put your name into the hat for this program. You can request up to $2,500 or as little as $500, and it's enough money to get good projects off the ground and, you know, moving along. You can also visit some of the booths along the side where you'll see the products of some of those mini grants that I just talked about, and happy grant writing.
Okay, now, one more brief announcement, and then we're very excited to have Mr. Rees here to learn more about our first president, George Washington, and historic Mount Vernon. But I also want to thank, finally, the room today. First of all, the staff here at the Wicomico County Youth and Civic Center for a wonderful dinner, or lunch. Dana Evans for the Smith Island cake. Once again, Dana, thank you. And two of our executive committee members for LESHC, that's John Terrell and Jack Lennox, who helped deliver things and get the room set up and all that, so thanks to John and Jack also. Okay, here's what we're going to do next. We are going to welcome to the stage our speaker today. I'll tell you a little bit about this fine gentleman, but as Sharon and I leave the stage, we'll be joined by a few other members to begin collecting the blue forms. So as you're listening to me speak, please finish your bids, and we will try to get you the announcements of the winners here at the end. So here today in Salisbury, Maryland, in the Lower Eastern Shore Heritage Area, we are pleased to welcome James C. Rees, who is the Executive Director of Historic Mount Vernon, which is the nation's most popular historic home. They get over 1 million visitors each year. I bet George never thought about that when he was living there. He's served in several other positions at Mount Vernon since he arrived there in 1983. Now, under Mr. Rees's leadership, Mount Vernon has completed a $116 million capital campaign, constructed a new orientation center, an education center, restored and reopened George Washington's historic grist mill and distillery, interesting tour, and created a new exhibition area dedicated to George Washington, pioneer farmer. We can relate to that here in the shore. The estate's endowment has grown from $4 million to about $100 million. Very impressive. He has previously worked on nationwide properties program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation as a PR director for the College of William and Mary and the Virginia Shakespeare Festival, and as a cub reporter for the Daily Press in Tidewater, Virginia. Mr. Rees holds an undergraduate degree from the College of William and Mary and a master's degree from George Washington University. How appropriate. He has served as the president of the Virginia Association of Museums, president of the Friends of the Potomac River, and is the author of George Washington's Leadership Lessons and numerous other publications. And as Sharon mentioned earlier, he has appeared on a number of nationally televised programs, including The Today Show, C-SPAN, and CBS Sunday Morning. Will you all join me, please, in welcoming Mr. James C. Rees?
Gonna cut some lights off now and let you go to sleep on perfect quiet, you know. Okay? We cut out some of these lights. It's like having candlelight. Thank you, Jim, very much. It's truly an honor to be here with you today. And I certainly applaud your efforts to preserve the unique history and culture of Maryland's Lower Eastern Shore. You might say that this wonderful portrait of Washington, the dollar bill by Gilbert Stuart, is a double-edged sword. Yes, it's incredibly familiar because Americans use it to purchase things on a daily basis. But in surveys and focus groups, we're told that most Americans think of Washington exactly the way he looks here. They think of him as an older gentleman with a powdered wig, although in reality, Washington never wore a wig. And he has that dour, almost sour expression on his face, and that uncomfortable-looking mouth, with those lips clamped closed to hide those famous false teeth. Instinctively, Americans know that Washington was great, but in terms of personality, They think he lacks color. They think he's sedentary, he's lackluster. And an unthinkable word that people use far, far too often, they often say he's boring. Well, I promise you, nothing could be further from the truth. Of all the founding fathers, Washington was the most robust, the most adventurous, the most athletic, and certainly one of the most charismatic of all the founders. As Dr. Benjamin Rush noted, I quote, "You would distinguish him to be a general from among 10,000 people. There is not a king in Europe that would not look like a valet by his side." So our job in Mount Vernon, and we take it quite seriously, is to wake people up to the real George Washington. Because if modern Americans think of Washington as boring, it's not his fault, it's ours. For instance, it frustrates us that Washington's talents as an architect have been ignored for decades. A couple of years ago, architectural critic Paul Goldberger, among the best in the nation, wrote in the New Yorker magazine, I quote, "While it's true that Washington was not as sophisticated as Jefferson, Mount Vernon has a kind of brazen panache that the more cerebral Monticello, Jefferson's home, simply does not. Washington designed with a curious combination of caution and bold strokes, and his work as an architect turned out to presage American taste far more than anything produced by Jefferson. In truth, Mount Vernon appears to be the most influential 18th century house in all of America," unquote. Now, inside the house, you'll find all sorts of decorative details which reveal Washington's confidence and creativity when it comes to design. For instance, the dramatic staircase in the center of the house, and an intricate Rococo mantel and the overmantel in the small dining room, and Washington's choice of more elaborate ionic door frames for just the best rooms in the house, and the use of the bullseye window outside to add a much-needed accent point to the west front of the house, while inside it provides a warm, flattering light for his incredible collection of china. Washington loved the concept of fooling the eye. In several rooms, he used faux grain finishes. And outside, his craftsmen grooved broad, simple pine boards to make them appear as an assembly of stones. The secret ingredient in what he called his rustication process is really sand, and it's applied to a coat of still wet paint, so the surface doesn't just look like, but it feels like stone. Yet Washington's greatest contribution to American architecture is undoubtedly the piazza, the two-story porch on the east side of the mansion. 8 Tuscan columns, though narrow, somehow still present an image of strength and stability, and it provides a perfect frame for his river view. Still, Washington himself never pretended to be an architect. In fact, he wrote to his friend William Thompson, the architect of the Capitol, that he had no other guide but his eye. So I think he'd be very surprised that residential neighborhoods all across America have homes with columns much like his, and that banks and office buildings and even an occasional gas station has been adorned with cupolas for over 2 centuries. Now, if George Washington was filling out a job application, something he seldom, if ever, had to do, when it came to the occupation line, he would have entered a single word, and that's farmer. In fact, Washington was perhaps the most forward-thinking farmer in all of America. What made him different, what made him unusual, was that he was determined to renew the land rather than exhaust one field and just move to another. He tried all sorts of fertilizers, including tree mold and fish heads and the rich mud from the bottom of the river. And he tested dozens of crop rotations and finally selected one 7-year system that he felt maximized profits without ruining the soil. He also invented his own plow, and he deserves credit for introducing the mule to American farming. Washington also constructed one of the most unusual and fascinating barns in all of farming history, which we recently spent 5 years recreating on the Mount Vernon estate, using this one surviving photograph as a guide. Architecturally, it's another Washington triumph, but to him it really wasn't a building. It was much more of a machine. Washington's newfangled barn called for the treading out of wheat by horses on the second floor of the barn. Their hooves pounded apart the wheat from the chaff. The separated grain then passed through tiny spaces in the floorboards to the first floor below, where it was collected and stored, usually in sacks or barrels. Meanwhile, most of the chaff remained on the floor up above. Now, once the wheat was treaded and cleaned with a wheat fan, Washington gave himself several options. He could sell the grain totally unprocessed, or he could grind the grain at his new grist mill, a stone building with incredibly sophisticated machinery for the 18th century. Washington's mill was so fast and efficient that he was able to process not only his crops, but thousands of bushels of wheat from his neighbors. He transported his finest flour on his own ship all the way over to England and Portugal. But Washington still wasn't satisfied that he'd maximized his profits from grain. So next to the mill, he constructed what we now believe was the largest whiskey distillery in all of America. And he wisely hired an experienced Scotsman named James Anderson to supervise this operation. You see here what we believe to be is one of the original distilling tubs, which was used sometimes quite illegally well into the 20th century. Anderson was able to operate 5 of these stills simultaneously, and in the last year of Washington's life, this ledger from the distillery tells us that he produced 11,000 gallons of whiskey, as well as some good homemade beer. I should mention in the 18th century, males 15 years and older consumed an average of 5 gallons of hard liquor and 34 gallons of beer on average each year. That's twice the alcohol that the average American consumes today. We recently reconstructed Washington's distillery, which opened with great fanfare last April. And I might also add that Washington served the leftover cooked mash from his distillery to his hogs, which were the fattest and happiest animals on the Mount Vernon estate. And is it any wonder you may have your dessert, but Martha Washington's culinary specialty was old-fashioned Virginia ham. Believe it or not, Washington's most successful business at Mount Vernon was fishing. Each spring, he'd borrow boats and borrow sleighs from his neighbors and cast huge seine nets into the Potomac River. In just 7 weeks, he was able to net over 1.5 million shad and herring, most of which he salted in barrels and shipped to ports throughout the colonies in the Caribbean and even as far away as Europe. Seems Washington also found a free time to have some fishing for fun. You see here his original box of fishing tackle, and here is the very stylish pair of sunglasses that reduce the sun's glare off the shining Potomac River. Now, I don't think many people would describe Washington as a ladies' man, but in fact, I've been fascinated by the descriptions of Washington written by a number of women, including Abigail Adams, who described Washington as a temple made of majestic fabric, built by hands divine. The gentleman and soldier are agreeably blended in him. This is especially strong praise because Mrs. Adams wasn't easily impressed. And I'm sure it drove John Adams, her husband, absolutely crazy because for so many other reasons, he was already quite jealous of George Washington. But perhaps Abigail simply couldn't help herself because by most accounts, Washington was really quite dashing and he loved to dance. That's why he paid for his own dance lessons at just age 14. And much, much later on, in fact, at several presidential parties, Mrs. Washington would be greeting guests at the door because there existed a long line of ladies just waiting for one spin around the dance floor with her husband. But don't get the wrong impression. Washington was also a man's man. He was almost 6'3", with very strong arms and long legs and big hands and big feet. Jefferson called him the best horseback rider in the colonies. And perhaps his only major physical weakness, those famous false teeth, was not uncommon in the 18th century. Lots of people were dentally challenged. According to John Adams, Washington tried to crack walnuts with his teeth when he was just a teenager, and not long after that, they began to loosen and fall out. Although Washington followed the advice of his contemporary dentist, he used dental powders and a toothbrush much like your own. His dental problems continued to persist. We know that in the 1780s, a French dentist tried unsuccessfully to transplant teeth into Washington's mouth, and some evidence exists that several enterprising slaves sold their teeth for this experiment. By the time he took the oath of office as president, Washington was sadly in full dentures. But despite rumors to the contrary, Washington's teeth were not made of wood. Most of the teeth, in fact, were carved from the ivory of hippos, and a few were the whittled down teeth extracted from cows, which were then attached to a lead base, and that lead base was still another threat to the health of George Washington. There were also two small springs that applied pressure to keep the teeth from falling out. Now, looking at these, somehow it doesn't seem surprising that Washington read the shortest inaugural address in the history of the presidency, just 135 words. Having bad teeth wasn't his only flaw. He was known to have a severe temper, which he worked diligently to control. But sometimes his willpower simply wasn't enough, and he exploded. A very rare occurrence, but one his subordinates were always mindful of. In one particular Revolutionary War battle, a soldier remembers that Washington cursed so mightily that the leaves actually shook on the trees. Washington was also a great stickler for detail. He once figured out that a bushel of Timothy seeds would include on average 13,410,000 individual kernels. Throughout his adult life, Washington was embarrassed that he never went to college, although several have decided to honor him in their names. But the first president was an avid reader. His library included about 1,000 books, including great classics, moving poetry, and a number of books on farming. He was also a remarkably prolific writer. We know he penned some 40,000 individual letters, and his papers are being edited now at the University of Virginia. And before they finish, the editors expect to publish more than 90 separate books of his writings. What makes this truly amazing is that Washington, unlike most of the other founding fathers, spent very little time, we're going to switch slide trays right now real briefly, very little time behind a desk. For the 8 years of the war, he never took a vacation day, and he came back to Mount Vernon once, simply as a stopover with Rochambeau on the way to Yorktown. But when he was at home, he was able to copy letters by a clerk, or better yet, on this 18th century version of a Xerox machine called a letterpress. And if the weather was especially warm, the master of Mount Vernon might sit here. In this latest trend in home decor, it's called an automatic fan chair. You simply sit down, push on the pedals, and wait for the breeze. The Washington's hospitality at Mount Vernon was simply incredible. We know that in 1 year, there were 677 overnight guests at Mount Vernon. And a few would spend a week, and even a few would spend several months in one of the 9 comfortable bedrooms. Recent research has revealed some interesting new aspects about some of these bedrooms, including some terrific wall-to-wall carpets and bright new fabrics. This is the only bed we assume these guests didn't sleep in, because it was shared by George and Martha Washington. We know that a weary Washington once wrote a letter to his mother saying that she would never, ever be happy moving to Mount Vernon. There were so many noisy guests coming and going that his home resembled a well-resorted tavern. In fact, his mother took this warning quite seriously. She didn't visit Mount Vernon for the last 30 years of her life. But dozens of friends and strangers alike would be strolling in Washington's carefully orchestrated outdoor spaces. And in my opinion, what Washington did better than anyone else at Mount Vernon was to blend architecture and landscape. The rhythm of the rooftops and the fences and the texture of the chimneys and the stark white paint in contrast to the deep blue sky. Washington knew how to make even the simplest scene look beautiful and tranquil, and he knew his flowers almost as well as he knew his crops. In fact, a PBS specialist described Washington's upper garden as one of the most important and authentic gardens in the entire world, in large part because of the long list of flowers selected and nurtured by Washington himself. This garden features standard as well as espalier fruit trees, including apple and apricot and peach and pear and, yes, cherry. There are also exquisite period roses, bright oriental poppies, fancy fringed tulips, and elegant crown imperials. And the backdrop for the upper garden is Washington's greenhouse, where he provided shelter in the winter for tropical plants like orange and lemon trees and aloes and even scented palms. And interestingly, on the other side of the greenhouse structure is the slave quarters. Washington designed an ingenious system of underground flues that extended from one huge central fireplace, and these simple subfloor heating ducts actually kept both plants and people warm. Adjacent to the Bowling Green with a southeast exposure that good gardeners just dream about is the lower garden, which is devoted entirely to producing foodstuffs for Washington's table. The truth be told, Washington didn't just appreciate the land he owned at Mount Vernon. In fact, he speculated in real estate like an 18th century Donald Trump. First, he expanded Mount Vernon from 2,000 to 8,000 acres. But he ended up owning land in what would be today 7 different states, totaling nearly 70,000 acres. So, why did Washington spend almost all of his cash on land? Well, it's because he truly believed that America's future was exceptionally bright and that westward expansion would happen quickly and with great enthusiasm. And we should never forget that Washington was a wonderful husband. He was a loyal partner to one remarkable woman for no less than 40 years. They didn't have any children of their own, but I should add here that most scholars blame this on George, not Martha, believing he was rendered sterile by a childhood disease. Still, Washington helped to raise Martha's 2 children and then 2 of her grandchildren with true love and affection. And even when it comes to the controversial topic of the 18th century, which of course is slavery, we're not afraid to talk about where Washington stood. He inherited his first slave at age 11, and at one point, George and Martha together controlled more than 300 enslaved people. But Washington was a lifelong learner, and he wasn't afraid to say, "I'm wrong," and to switch courses accordingly. He didn't address the issue of slavery as president because he believed so strongly, and most scholars think he was right, that it would divide the young nation before it even had a chance to survive. He tried to set an example for others, however, because he freed the slaves he owned in his last will and testament and left a considerable amount of money to care for those who couldn't care for themselves. Now you can say, too little, too late. Perhaps, but the sad fact is, 9 of our early presidents owned slaves, and only one president, the first president, ever set them free. In doing so, he made it clear that he felt the lofty ideals on which America was based and the institution of slavery could not and should not coexist. And he did this with full knowledge that he was signing a death notice for his beloved Mount Vernon estate. The entire plantation did indeed just fall apart without slavery, and that's why just 53 years after his death, a group of patriotic women from across the nation had to rescue a dilapidated mansion just in the nick of time. Even today, Mount Vernon's board consists exclusively of women, never more than 1 per state. And they remain fiercely independent. Mount Vernon has never accepted a dime of government money, and yet we still educate some 300,000 school kids a year who visit us, and millions more with classroom materials that we send to elementary schools across the country. And to better educate all of our enthusiastic visitors, we just opened a pair of new buildings totaling some 65,000 square feet. Now, don't be concerned that we've ruined the special and unique atmosphere of Washington's home, because 60% of our new square footage is placed under a pasture with sheep happily grazing on top. And even the above-ground construction is tucked behind a wall, much like the walls that surround Washington's garden. We've also spent over $1 million planting a lot of mature trees, not just little saplings, to screen the distant rooftops from the historic core of the estate, so our new landscape doesn't look like it was planted yesterday. This is a scene from our official ribbon cutting at the Ford Orientation Center. You might recognize Arthur David McCullough there on the far right. The center also features a $5 million Hollywood-style film on a 40-foot screen and 2 side-by-side state-of-the-art theaters. And this film actually focuses on the young Washington, who really was what we call the action hero of the 18th century. There are also 4 original bronze sculptures of George and Martha and 2 of their grandchildren, Nellie and Washi. The lobby features an oversized stained glass window with different scenes from the life of Washington, as well as the perfect method of organizing people for their visit to the mansion, which we call Mount Vernon in miniature. It's a 1-inch to 1-foot exact scale model of Mount Vernon. Everything really works. The drawers and the furniture even pull out, and the little doorknobs actually turn. In our new Donald W. Reynolds Museum and Education Center, it looks very modest when you approach the front door, but it's really not. There are 25 different galleries and theaters that cover Washington's entire life. In the museum portion, the galleries are elegant and traditional and feature the remarkable bust of Washington by the famous French sculptor Houdon, and a recreation of a festive dinner party from the presidential house in Philadelphia. We actually use a huge mirror there to make a table for 6 look like a table for 12. Many of the rare artifacts are on exhibit at Mount Vernon for the very first time, including Martha's stunning jewelry collection and the simple American-made brown suit that Washington wore to his inauguration. We have the most impressive display of Washington books and manuscripts in the world in the Gilder Lehrman Gallery. And in the At Home with the Washingtons Gallery, we feature classics like Washington's favorite hunting horn and the original Dove Apiece weather vane we took from the top of the mansion. We spent 2 years and more than $1 million conducting forensic research into exactly how Washington really looks, using remarkable 3D lasers to gather every little millimeter of information about his clothing, his teeth, his eyeglasses, anything that would provide a clue to his real appearance. Our new exhibits feature 3 lifelike models of Washington, including this adventurous young surveyor at age 19, and the determined commander-in-chief on his trusted and beloved horse Blueskin at Valley Forge, and finally the 57-year-old president taking the oath of office on the balcony of Federal Hall. The French and Indian War Gallery features an interactive map that explains to people who really started that war, and of course, it was the 23-year-old surveyor from Virginia, George Washington. It also talks about the diorama of the debacle at Fort Necessity, where Washington was forced to surrender for the only time in his life. We also have a gallery with a sound and light show on the tax revolts of the 1770s, and a replica of Washington's family pew at Powick Church, where you can sit down and watch one of 11 videos provided by our friends at the History Channel. That's also one of the most important displays of 18th century firearms in the entire world. And a charming little theater where you can savor a 10-minute film about the 40-year romance of George and Martha Washington. Now, the most talked about feature, which is really impossible to get a good picture of, is what we call the Revolutionary War Gallery. When cannon fire there, real smoke appears and your seats actually rumble. Then, when Washington finally gets in the boat, crosses the Delaware, you look up and it really snows on the audience for 45 seconds. We pulled out these stops because I'll admit, it's been incredibly difficult to establish a connection with what I describe as the most challenging visitor on the face of the earth, and that would be an 8th grade boy. Because I promise you, these two little well-behaved patriots are the exceptions, they're not the rule. In some of our new experiences, we push the envelope pretty far, but it's because we feel we need to speak this guy's language if we have any hope of getting him hooked on history. Because this is really our goal at Mount Vernon, to convince every child to embrace George Washington so that hopefully they can follow in his footsteps. We can put the lights back up now for just a second. You know, I've been fortunate enough to travel to a lot of different places in the nation, and I've always been struck by the different fan clubs for all the individual members of the Founding Fathers. Right now, there's a resurgence for praise for Alexander Hamilton in New York, and ever since David McCullough's book on John Adams, people seem to love him, and just 2 hours west of Mount Vernon, they worship the ground that Thomas Jefferson walked on. And there's no doubt about it. We were blessed, so blessed, that a generation of bright and spirited and patriotic leaders all came together to create something so special and so lasting. But I always like to point out that every time these great men had their backs up against the wall and had to choose one among them to be their leader, they always selected the same man. They always turned to George Washington, who never let them or us down. Thomas Jefferson said, "Washington's justice was the most inflexible I have ever known. He errs as other men do, but he always errs with integrity. He is, in every sense of the words, a good, a wise, and a great man." America's second best president, Abraham Lincoln, who always loved to tell people that his most important book as a boy was a bio of Washington, once said, "Washington is the mightiest name on earth. To add brightness to the sun or glory to the name of Washington is alike impossible. Let none attempt it. Simply pronounce the name, and in its naked, deathless splendor, leave it shining on." And finally, Light Horse Harry Lee said, "Vice shudders in his presence, and virtue always feels his fostering hand. First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen." Thank you so much.
Wow, it's amazing when you can see just what you can do with the subject matter we have here on the shore at Mount Vernon, and it gives us all a goal to shoot for. I know working with you all in the heritage community, we certainly will do that.